Good morning. Today's text is Isaiah 40, 12 through 20. Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, and marked off the heavens with a span, enclosed the dust of the earth in a measure, and weighed the mountains in scales and the hills in a balance? Who has measured the Spirit of the Lord, or what man shows him his counsel? Whom did he consult, and who made him understand? Who taught him the path of justice, and taught him knowledge, and showed him the way of understanding? Behold, the nations are like a drop from a bucket, and are accounted as the dust on the scales. Behold, he takes up the coastlands like fine dust. Lebanon would not suffice for fuel, nor are its beasts enough for a burnt offering. All the nations are as nothing before him. They are accounted by him as less than nothing and emptiness. To whom then will you liken God? Or what likeness compared with him? An idol. A craftsman casts it, and a goldsmith overlays it with gold, and casts for it silver chains. He who is too impoverished for an offering chooses wood that will not rot. He seeks out a skillful craftsman to set up an idol that will not move. You may be seated.
Well, good morning. It's good to be with you guys this morning. If we've not met, if you're a guest with us, my name is David Black. I'm the campus pastor here. Just want to welcome you to Sunday morning here. This isn't the only thing we do as a church. We've got a lot of things that happen throughout the week, and I'd encourage you to maybe check them out or grab someone with a red tag and talk to them. But if you are a guest with us and you just kind of want to know who we are or maybe just say hi, I'm out in the garage afterwards, and feel free to come up and say hello. We've got a little gift for you as well, too. Something that we say here often, and we mean it, is that we would rather pursue God together than to pretend that we have it all together. And so what we hope that means is that even if you're following Jesus or exploring Jesus, that as we look at God's heart, what we call the Bible, that he would begin to speak to you. And hopefully you have a community here in which to ask some good questions. So depending on how you grew up, this thing called the Bible might have been presented to you as an instruction booklet, or maybe it's like a Wikipedia thing on all things God-related, or a reference manual, or a history book. But we like to think of it as really the heart of God, and what he likes, what he doesn't like, how he feels about us, how he deals with those who love him, how he deals with those who dislike him, like what he's doing in the world. And it says something also about our heart. And so every time we look at this, we see something that God's saying to us about who we are as people, and every time we look at this, we see something that he's saying about himself. And I say all that because what we are starting today is a new series, and so from time to time, we will go through a section of Scripture or a book in the Bible, or a portion of a book, because this is kind of one book, many different letters written over the course of thousands of years, hundreds of years, and so we are doing that all the way up to Christmas, specifically looking at a book of the Bible, or a letter, if you will, called Isaiah. It's in the Old Testament, and we'll be looking at that all the way up leading to Christmas. And we've just entitled this series, Theology, which means the study of God. But you might notice some letters are highlighted. It's also what we call the OG, right? Because in it, we're going to take a look at the original God of the Bible and see how he reveals himself. And here's the question we hope to answer: why he is still worth trusting. And so we're going to take a look at Isaiah week by week. Today we kick that off. As we kick that off, I thought I would just start with this question for you, okay? Imagine you're at the beach. Here's the question. Just think about this. I might have you raise hands. I don't know. We'll see how I feel in a second, okay? Would you rather, it's one of those things, would you rather be in the water and see a shark, or be in the water and think you saw a shark, right? Which is worse, okay? Anybody in the water? I'd rather be in the water and see a shark. Yeah. Anybody? I'd rather be in the water and thought I saw a shark. Yeah, I'm like, I'd rather see it and know what I'm dealing with than think I saw it or felt one, right? That's my biggest thing. In the classic movie Jaws, the protagonist, that's the main actor, is scared of the water, and his job is to protect people on the water. He goes out on a boat after a massive shark that's reported in the area, and classically, after the first time you see any evidence of this shark, he turns to his co-actor in the scene, the man who's piloting the boat, and he looks at him and he utters this famous line. Does anyone know what it is? You're gonna need a bigger boat. You're gonna need a bigger boat. In many ways, that is where we find ourselves as a culture today. The boats that we have built are too small for the things that we see in our water. You say, what do you mean? When we take a look at the news cycle, or what our phones are showing us, or devices are showing us, or what our friends are telling us, or the things that are coming at us, they are so massive. Countries at war, pandemics across the globe, anxiety, personal tragedy, generational upheaval, you name it. You open your device, and as you scroll, we are confronted with things that we thought at one point, we thought they were in the water, right? You're like, hey, something doesn't feel right. Was that? But now we see them, and for many of us, the boats that we've constructed to navigate this culture, they're not big enough. So for example, maybe it's secularism. And you're like, material world is all there is, science and rational thought, but now, what do I do with this crisis of humanity, and how do we navigate that? It seems like what we've been given isn't enough. Maybe it's technology. Maybe it's your family upbringing. I'm not sure what it is, but all of us at some point in time throughout the week are confronted by something, and we just think, that is too big. And so here's what's happening, okay? This is not just me saying this. This is what our sociologists and even those who are not followers of Jesus are saying. What we're seeing in today is more and more people are turning to something outside of this world or larger than this world as an answer for the problems that we see in this world. And so you can call this spirituality, you can call this like a journey or an exploration in like the metaphysical world. You could just call this, I'm going back to church. It's happening. And in fact, Barna says this, that recently, in aggregate terms, the multi-year climb in public sentiment toward Jesus equates to nearly 30 million more U.S. adults who claim to follow Jesus today than in 2021. That is a large, significant thing. By the way, this is mostly happening in the generations from 18 to about 35, where we see this occurring. But by the way, this is not just simply Christianity. In addition to Christianity growing, religion overall is growing. Islam is growing at a rapid rate. Wiccan and pagan religions, the interest in that is growing more and more. So what do we see what's happening? People are saying the boat that I was brought up in or the boat that I built is too small. We are constantly taking a look at what we see in the world or what we see in us and what we see in our families, and we go, man, we got to get a bigger boat. We got to get a bigger boat. Is there anything large enough that will keep us afloat in the time in which we live and keep us safe from what we know is in the water? This is exactly the same question that the people of Israel are asking in the passage that Laura read for us. So some background real quick. Isaiah was a guy who was a prophet. That meant that he didn't tell necessarily the future. So whatever you got, like no fortune telling, no like glass orbs to look into and divine. Basically, a prophet's job was to speak God's word to the people. Here's what God says. And so he received a couple different messages, but here's what's going on in the country, and you'll see why he says what he says. Israel has just lost their city, their capital city, Jerusalem. It's been ransacked. Their culture has been crumbling, falling apart. Their temple is destroyed. And the Babylonian army has just come in and wrecked them and carried away most of anyone who was well-learned, well-educated, who's who, rich, in charge, all that, and just devastated the land. And it's into this disaster and chaos that Isaiah begins to speak. And many people are going, whatever we built, it's not sufficient for this. And Isaiah begins to talk, and he begins to say two things. He begins to say that God's going to come and comfort them, that he's going to help them, and he'll save them. But then they start going, well, how do I know that this God is big enough to do that? And then he begins, what we're going to follow, he begins to talk to them about why God is still worth trusting. And he begins to talking about God in large terms, not things that we can be. So we can be loving, we can be merciful, we can be gracious. Those are things that the Bible describes about God. But Isaiah is like, he's huge. He's everywhere. He knows everything. He's unchanging. And so what we're doing over the course of the next few weeks is we are walking our way through these responses to the question, why is God still worth trusting? By taking a look at these attributes of who the God of the Bible is. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to believe in the God of the Bible. What it means is I'm just showing you from the Christian's perspective and from the Old Testament, the God of who he says he is in the Bible. And I would just ask you, hold it up to whatever boat you're sailing. It could be, and what we would believe, is that God, who he is a boat that is sufficient enough for where we are in this moment in time, okay? So here's the first one that we're starting off with today. It's really this. God is still worth trusting because he doesn't need anyone or anything. This means that he doesn't need anyone, not dependent upon anyone, and he's not dependent upon anything. You're like, my teenager thinks he's that. You're like, yeah, I know. But unlike your teenager, God is saying, this is who I am, and it is true. And we found it in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 12 through 20, what was read for us today. And here's the main point. I'm just going to tell it to you up front. Here's what Isaiah is telling us, and here's how I would think about this and the message that we're landing on. You could put it this way, that a God who doesn't need us is exactly the God that we need. You say, what? Yeah, the God who doesn't need us is exactly the type of God that we need. And so even if you didn't believe in a God, and if I just asked you, if there was a God, what kind of God would you trust? You'd probably say, well, I'd probably trust a God who's not dependent upon me. And what we see in the Bible is that there's a God who's not dependent upon you. You'd probably say, I trust a God who's not dependent on our little governments. And what we see in the Bible is a God who's not dependent upon our little governments. I would love to trust in a God who's not dependent upon air or water or rain or the changing of seasons or whatever's going on in nature. And what we see in the Bible is a God who's not dependent upon those things. So what I want to do for you today is two things. I want to walk through this text with you that was read so that you can understand it and hopefully see that I'm not just making this up. And two, I just want to reinforce and say, well, if this is true, then what does that mean for us at the end, okay? So really, we're going to take a look at that the Bible presents a God who doesn't need us. And then we're going to take a look at why that's good for us. All right? A God who doesn't need us in verse 40. Okay, you have to put on your thinking hats a little bit today because I promise you we're going to get to the end and apply this to your life sufficiently. But what I want you to see is what Isaiah is doing here in this text. And so all throughout this text, here's what we could say. Isaiah is saying, God does not need these things to exist. In fact, the opposite is true. These things need God to exist. And the first thing that he talks about is nature. Notice, he says right here, who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hands. So if you click it again, we've got measurements and scale here. Right here. There we go. Measured, right? Hollow of his hands. This little thing. So who has measured the water in the hollow? Who's marked off the heavens with a span? A span would have been from here to here back then. Measure and weighed the mountains, scales and hills in a balance. So this idea of measuring things, but then measuring things that are monumental in size, right? So again, click it right here. We've got waters, heavens. So he's kind of doing this opposite thing. He's kind of going like, if you go to the water, like in the oceans, and like a hollow of his hands. If you go to the water in the sky, the atmosphere, it's kind of both those things. You'll notice he'll go like dust and mountains. Who has marked off the heavens? Who's enclosed the dust of the earth in a measure? That would have just been a little basket about this big. Like, who's put the dust? Scientists tell us, I looked this up, there's 17 million metric tons of dust in our atmosphere alone. That's not dust on you or dust on the ground. That's 17 million elephants in our atmosphere. And he's like, hey, it's a little tiny basket. God's like, here's a gift basket to take home with you. It's just the dust of the earth. Here you are. Mountains in the scales. And so what we see here is all he's saying, he's pulling all of these things from all over and trying to flip our perspective. Think about it this way. If you ask anybody, even if they're not a follower of Jesus, when do you and where do you feel most close to God? Almost certainly somebody will say, in nature. In nature. So we go out in nature and we look at all these things and we go, oh, they're so huge and they're so big, right? But God goes, oh, no, let me show you nature from my perspective, right? So God goes, I'm going to show you, when you think of me out in nature, you're looking at these big things. From my perspective, they're really tiny, which if you're old enough and you remember this movie, it made me think of this picture right here, right? Is this a school for ants, right? Like, the guy looks at the model in the show and goes, is this the real thing? But for God, that's how it looks. God's like, the thing that makes you think of me, when I look at it, man, that's nothing. It's nothing. It's tiny. So he's really saying, nature needs me. Don't think for a minute that I need nature. I created it. I hold it all together. And we're this little tiny thing in the middle of the tiny thing, right? The thing that we go, there has to be a God. And he's like, yeah, we're looking at just this tiny thing in comparison to him. He's so much bigger than that. And to double down on this, he goes on a little bit further and he says this. He's like, not only just is nature that way, but when God created the world, he didn't really ask anybody. Notice, he says, who asked God? Who showed him counsel? Who did God consult? Who taught him how to make the world? Who taught him justice? Who showed him knowledge and understanding? Now, this is a jab, okay? If this is a jab at the Babylonian god, who the Babylonians just captured them. Because in the Babylonian faith, the person who invented and created the world, that god, had to go seek a god of wisdom, a goddess of wisdom, and ask for her help. And so kind of like Isaiah's going like, hey, I know that you just conquered us, but our God, there was no suggestion box at creation, right? No committees. But in pagan religions, gods often act that way. They act like on committee. They talk together. This God creates out of nothing. So nature doesn't need him, or nature needs him. He doesn't need nature. Additionally, he moves on and he notices, look, the second thing he shows us here is not only, that's the Babylonian God. There he is, right there. God of wisdom, making the earth. Nations. So not only does nature not need him and he doesn't need nature, God doesn't need the nations. Behold, the nations are like a drop from a bucket. So think about this. If all the waters of the earth are held in the middle of his hand, he goes, you know the greatest nations that have ever lived and been here on the planet? Find a bucket in the middle of that ocean. Take that bucket out. So now we're like microscopic. And then a drop from that, right? That's the greatest wonders and nations in the world. He's like, that's what it's like. I don't need the nations. In fact, they need me. They're counted as dust on the scales. This is the little tiny dust that falls on the scale and doesn't register anything. You know what I'm talking about? Like if you've ever used a scale for flour and baking, you want to measure it. Occasionally some little particles fall down and it doesn't weigh anything. And he goes, whew. He's like, that's what nations are like. He keeps going. Lebanon would not suffice for fuel, nor the beasts enough for burnt offering. That language right there, you can click it again. That language is like altar language. It's worship. It's sacrifice. He's saying if you took all the trees in Lebanon and all the animals and tried to worship me with them, it wouldn't be enough. Wouldn't be enough. And then he says, all the nations are as nothing before him. They are counted by him as less than nothing, less than nothing and emptiness. This last line here is a reference back to the creation narrative in Genesis. Okay, so I know this is a little technical, but I think it's important. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. This is Genesis 1. And the earth was formless and void, right? That same language, formless and void, is this sentence right here. He goes, the nations are formless and void. What is he trying to do? He's looking at Babylon, he's looking at Assyria, he's looking at all the great nations and empires that have ever existed. And he's like, all your effort, all your buildings, all your commerce, all your armies, all your cities, when you've spent years, 500 years in Roman Empire, when you've conquered half the planet, when you've done all those things, you're starting at my starting point, right? All your efforts are like formless and void. That's where I begin. In other words, this isn't a race. You're way behind, right? 7 wonders of the world, ancient world, statues, gold, armies and power. And he goes, it's like nothing. And he's going, again, I don't need you. You need me. God is not looking for our vote or validation. He's not going, hey guys, I'm really lost here. I'm not sure what's happening next. Why don't we vote on it? Get your nations together and tell me. That's not what's happening. God doesn't look, just God's perspective, there's never been a country in the world like this one. God's like, I'll wait. All right. Our country, compared to the history of the rest, Egypt, we've got iron chariots. God's like, we've got stealth planes. He's like, yeah, it's a little bit further. I'll wait. God's like, it's nothing. It's nothing compared to who I am. And then he says this, the next section, he goes, not only is nature dependent upon me, and I don't need it. Not only are nations dependent on me, but I don't need them. He's like, by the way, humanity as a whole, people. I don't need people. If anything, they need me. Which is interesting here, because he starts to talk about idols. Look, he says, to whom will then you liken God, or what likeness compare with him? And he goes, an idol? He's kind of saying that in a question exclamation, because that's what they were doing. And what he's demonstrating is that humanity has a need for God. And if we don't worship the God that exists, we will worship a God that we make. In other words, we can't not worship. The default nature of us is that we need something to say, you will save us, you will help us, you're the answer and the solution. We need God. That's who we are as people. All places, all times, in every culture, you will find some sort of religion and worship. You will. By the way, what you think you need most is probably where you are more tempted to be worshiping something other than God. So for example, if you're like, I'm ugly. Now, I'm not saying that anyone tells you that. I'm just saying maybe you say that to yourself, okay? Right, wrong, otherwise, I'm not sure. We're not going to vote, okay? But if you say, like, I'm ugly, would that be metaphorically in your attitude and your disposition, or whether you're just going fit, you will be tempted to make an idol out of beauty. You will. If you're like, I'm not worth anything, you will be tempted to make an idol out of approval and what people say. If you're like, I have no money and I'm so poor, the temptation for us, because we're like, what I need is that, so I'm going to find something that will provide me that, and I will make it an idol, and I'll make good things that God gave us, like relationships and money and beauty, and we will turn them into ultimate things because we are needy. And so where we're needy, we worship. And God's like, hey, that's just an indication that you need me. Notice he says, he who is too impoverished. We're too impoverished. Neediness is a human quality. It's not a God quality. We have needs. He does not. And so most of what we do in our life when it comes to religion is navigating our neediness. And how you think about that and the way that you process it has a lot to do with who you believe God to be. Now, maybe you're just sitting here thinking about this, and maybe you're going, okay, I wish I was not so needy. In fact, for many of us, our goal in life is to not need anything or anyone, which means our goal in life is to be God, which is not a possibility. We don't like that we're needy. And maybe you're sitting here going, I wish I wasn't so needy. I recognize that gets me into trouble. Man, I'm looking for the person who's going to make me not needy. And we think of that as bad. But the truth is, it's actually a good thing. You say, what? Yeah, God has so designed us as people to be needy so that we might relate to him and find him. Your neediness is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a human thing. And the reason you're needy is because it's meant to lead you to him. Okay? So hopefully you see here, I think one more slide. Here we are, a summary, okay? I don't expect you to read that. But basically Isaiah is going, hey everybody, God doesn't need nature. It needs him. God doesn't need nations. They need him. God doesn't need humans. They need him. Think about any of the news that you get on your feed or in the old-fashioned way, somebody throws it at your house in a piece of paper. You read it. It's probably about nature. It's probably about some nations. And it's probably about humans. Most of the things that cause us trouble, pain, anxiety, most of the problems that we have, who's going to solve the problem with nature? No one's talking about that, right? Everybody's talking about that. Who's going to solve the problem with all the nations? No one's talking about that. That's all we're talking about. Who's going to solve the problem with humans? You're like, we're waiting. We're waiting. Every 4 years we ask that question, and every 4 years we seem to get it wrong. Anyway, that's all of it, okay? So why then, hopefully you're beginning to see, like, okay, if there's a God who doesn't need us, and we're actually built to need him, it may be a good thing. It may be a really good thing. In fact, that's our second part today, right? There's a God who doesn't need us, and it's exactly the God we need. I just wrote down, there's probably more than three, but I just wrote down 3 things, okay? 3 things of why this is good, and this is exactly God we need. First reason, he can't be bought. He can't be bought. You say, what do you mean? Well, he's a God that has everything. Therefore, what in the world are you going to offer him that he doesn't already have? Right? This is like the worst, if you've ever had somebody in your life, you're like, they have everything, they have all the money, I don't know what kind of gift I could give them, right? There's nothing that you could offer him that he doesn't already have. God, I'm going to get you a mountain. He's like, got it, made it, actually. God, I'm going to get you a yacht. He's like, don't need it, but sure, thanks, I guess, right? God, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get you a really good family. And he's like, I made all the families, man, right? Like, there's nothing you could offer him to move him or sway him, okay? This is not a political picture. It's just a well-known picture. Here we go. There's my disclaimer. Send me an email if you want. Okay, this guy over here, you may have heard of him. He wrote a book called The Art of the Deal, okay? This guy on the left, little less known. Does anyone know who this dude is? Yeah, you know who this is. Okay, great. Awesome. He's one of the best FBI hostage negotiators. And you can see his skills to use in your marriage online if you find them, okay? Which makes me wonder, why in the world is a hostage guy giving marriage advice? Is that really where we're at? But anyway, it's neither here nor there. Both these, the book and this guy, here's what they'll tell you. That when you're talking to somebody, it all comes down to one word that starts with an L. Love. No, it comes down to a word, leverage. Leverage. He says leverage is everything. If God doesn't need us, you cannot leverage him. You can't. You can try, but you can't. Here's the truth. I'm just gonna, as a pastor, as a person, here's the truth. Just thinking about this week. A lot of my prayer requests aren't requests. They're negotiations. I'm like, God, if you, then I. Or God, look what I will, and then would you. God, what kind of deal, God, can I make with you to get my kids up into adulthood safe and sane? Okay? What do you need? I don't have a lot, but what do you need? Right? God, what kind of deal do I need to make with you to fix this part of my life? God, I promise, I promise, this is the last time I'm going to ask you about this thing, right? He's like, I've never heard that before. But okay, promise. If you, then I. If we think that God can be moved by us offering him something, here's what happens in church world, okay? I'm not going to talk to you about your life. I'll talk to you about what I know. In church world, what happens is ministry turns into marketing. That's what it is. Okay, God, we're going to do this thing. We're going to help this over here so that, look at us, right? God's word, this thing, becomes like magic beans. I just take it home. I do the thing. A beanstalk's going to grow. There's a golden goose somewhere. It'll happen, right? Worship, this thing we do on Sundays, actually becomes more about getting something I deserve. So I'm here, Lord, so that you put it on the attendance roll, than giving him what he deserves, right? He doesn't need it. He deserves it. And what happens is our religion and our relationship becomes about getting God to meet my needs. How do I get the God of the universe, who needs nothing, to help me, who needs everything? In other words, let me put it this way. God does not need you to perform for him. Your moral performance and your moral behavior, your goodness or your lack of goodness, does not give him anything he needs. And in case you think I'm making this up, here's a Bible verse I didn't know existed. It's in Job chapter 22, verse 2 through 3. Listen to this. Can a man be of benefit to God? Can even a wise person benefit him? Here's the question. What pleasure would it give the Almighty if you were righteous? That's interesting. God, I promise I will be good. And he's like, okay. What does that get me? You're not giving me something I don't already have. We do this all the time. If you believe that your performance is what determines your relationship with God, you are setting yourself up for a life of disappointment because you are not perfect. You're not perfect. That doesn't mean, again, okay, we'll talk a second, it doesn't mean that there's not a standard or that God doesn't love humanity, that God doesn't care about us or about how we live with one another. He cares a lot about that, but he doesn't need it. And most of us live not as if God cares about that, but we live as if he needs our performance and that we somehow are earning our favor with him to some degree. He doesn't need it. You say, well, that sounds like a very, very cold God, right? You start saying like, hey, there's a God who doesn't need anything. That sounds very like, well, that doesn't seem very compassionate or empathetic. Is he just up there going like, I don't need you? Why do you keep coming back to me? Here's why it's not a cold thing. Here's why it's a good thing, actually. Think about it this way. A God who doesn't need something can't be tempted by anybody. Can't be tempted. Hey, here's a faster way to what? Make the world? I already did that. Right? Here's how you can, right? Can't be tempted. He can't be steered. He can't be corrupted. No one is going to offer him anything that he doesn't already have, which means that I can trust that he's not going to be manipulated by some crazy person over there. Right? That does not mean, listen, here's what that means. It doesn't mean that you're like, well, I'm praying for this, and that person's praying for the opposite, so I need my prayers to be better, and then, like, I'm afraid that their prayers are going to work, and then that'll manipulate God, and then God's going to use, like, that's not how it works at all. Right? He can't be corrupted. He can't be tempted at all. And if we begin to grasp that God needs nothing from me, here's what happens. if God needs nothing from me, could it be that he wants me to be in a relationship with him because he has everything for me? A God who needs nothing from me is also the exact same position as someone who might be able to offer and have everything for me. Okay, he can't be bought. Second thing, he's not my project. He's not our project. God is not made to be managed. You don't have to manage him. Some of us, that's what we do in our relationship with him. This is a little bit different than performance, right? But here's the truth. Everything that you're passionate about as a person eventually becomes a project, okay? I am passionate about my children. They're a little bit of a project. If you're passionate about baking and you start a business, eventually your baking business will become a project, right? If you love a pet and it's cute and cuddly and it licks your face and you take it home and you love it, eventually that pet is a project at some point or time. That's how we are as people. And what can happen is our passion for God can very easily turn into some sort of project that I need to be managed. God does not need to be managed by me. But we think this way as adults. And this is how bad it is. I was not at this place, but I have a picture here, it's kind of symbolically. I was at this great amphitheater watching somebody play, and I don't know, I'm 44 now, and here's what happens as you age, and some of you are further than me, so you already know this, and you're going to pat me on the head and say, that's cute. And some of you are like younger than me, and you're going to be like, that's horrible, but just wait, okay? I walk into some place like this. It was beautiful, ornate, decorated, high vaulted ceilings. You know what I thought? I wonder who has to change those lights. That's what I thought. Because I own a house, and home ownership is great. It's a great deal of work. That's what it is, right? Because you're like, I don't even get to enjoy this thing. I got to keep it up all the time. I got to keep the roof on. I got to keep the walls on. We're not even talking about basic things, right? You would think roofs and walls would just be normal, but they're not. You got to keep them up. But I walk in and I go, man, who's going to change those light bulbs? And the second thought isn't better. The second thought was, I wonder what the power bill is here. Who's paying for this? At some point, like as adults, you're just like, who's got to deal with that? And how much does it cost? Because everything in your life has to be managed. This is why vacation is great. Do you know why vacation is great? It's because you go to the beach. Hopefully, you go to the beach. You lay back on a towel, maybe just the sand. I don't know how you roll. And you look up, and there's this giant fireball in the sky. And you know what I don't think about at the beach, about the sun? I don't think, I wonder who's got to change that. I don't. It just happens. And I don't think this, I wonder what the bill is for that. Because that's dumb, because it's the sun. That's why it's vacation. Because I get to just what? Enjoy it. Enjoy it. This is why for some people, religion is more of a full-time job than a vacation. Because they believe that God somehow needs their maintenance, their upkeep. He doesn't. He's like the sun, but the sun's this big to him, right? He's huge. What would it be like to enjoy the God of the universe rather than try to manage him in your life? If your heart is always bent on management, here's the truth. You will never, ever be dependent on him. Those two things are mutually exclusive. I manage my children. They're dependent upon me, right? And the minute that they think that they need to manage the circumstance, they're no longer dependent. They're scared, they're anxious, they're worried. My job is management. Their job is dependence. That's why we enjoy childhood and all want to go back there mostly, to some extent. Dependence on God, who needs nothing, because I don't have to take care of him. Could it be that we're sitting here and going, look, maybe you're here today and you're like, I just need something in my life that doesn't depend on me keeping it alive. You ever thought that this week? My job, my hamster, my girlfriend, boyfriend, my education, something that doesn't require me making it happen, because I feel like every time I turn around, I have to make it happen. And God's like, it's me. It's me. Acts, a guy named Paul is talking to a group of philosophers. Here's what he says: the God who made the world and everything in it, being the Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man. God doesn't live in this building. Nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything. Why? Since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath. And what else? Well, everything. What's he saying? You can't manage him, so you might as well enjoy him, or at least get to know him. God does not need or require my upkeep. Here's a clue for me. When my relationship with God and this thing that I do begins to become like a chore, it's a pretty good indication that I'm managing God rather than worshiping him. If all of life just becomes, if this whole thing's a chore, it's a good indication that somewhere in my heart, I've tried to like manipulate or manage him, when really I ought to be worshiping him. Okay, exactly what we need, because he can't be bought. He's exactly what we need, because man, he's not my project. And here's the best one, and there might be more, like I said, but this is the last one I thought of. When he says, I love you, he means it. Have you ever noticed that with humanity, a lot of our neediness gets in the way of our honesty and authenticity in our relationships with one another? In other words, like, I don't know what relationships are like for you, whether it be marriage or friendship or work, but oftentimes we can love people because deep down inside of us, we're like, I kind of need something from you back. Maybe I need the love in return. Maybe I need the attention. Maybe I need your car, right? Maybe I need your job and I'm just waiting for you to leave. I don't know, right? It gets very, very, very complicated for us. We don't have a lot of room for us just to love somebody without needs, because we are by nature needy people. And the worst case, right, it's in the worst case, it's some sort of like manipulation. And nobody wants that. It's like, I'm going to use you to meet my needs, and the minute that you the minute you stop meeting my needs, well, I'm going to stop loving you to that degree. And maybe that's the family you grew up in, maybe that's a relationship in your past, and you bear the scars from that. So you know firsthand, I don't have to tell you. And in the worst sense, it's manipulation. In the best sense, in the very best, honest sense, our love is like mutual expectation, right? I love you. I also expect you never to leave. Except when I want you to leave. But then I want you to come back. Anyway, I love you. Okay? Mutual expectation. You're going to do this. I'm going to love you. You're going to love me. We'll be. The God of the universe isn't like that. In fact, listen to our songs, right? I just brought 2 album covers from antiquity. Okay? The first one is Kesha. Look out. Your love is my drug. Okay? It's a little needy, I think. Right? Like, I don't just need it, I need it, right? Like, it is a drug. That's what I'm interested in. Okay, for those of you who aren't into Kesha, this band is called Bread. That man there is named David Gates. You should look him up. But look, they wrote this song called Lost Without Your Love. I'm lost without your love, which sounds awesome unless you're really lost without somebody's love. And then it seems very clingy, right? Before marriage, I'm lost without your love. Oh, how awesome. In marriage, I'm lost without your love. Ugh, ick, right? Get away. Like, but it's this idea, God is not lost without our love. God doesn't need us, okay? What does that mean? That means that when he looks at you, which he does, in the Bible, which he does, and says, I love you, he is not trying to manipulate you. He is not trying to get anything from you. Why? Because he doesn't need it. He's totally fine without it, which means he really means it. It means he doesn't love you because you're good. He doesn't love you because you've got some edge that he's never seen before. He doesn't love you because you're his favorite. He doesn't love you because you're from a certain type of family or a certain type of background or a certain type of culture or a certain type of job. He doesn't love you because of the color of your hair or the color of your eyes or because you're really talented or you learned to play the flute when you were younger. He loves you because he loves you. Which if you open the Old Testament and other passages, here's what you see God say to people. I love you because I love you. Don't think it was anything about you that made me love you, which sounds really cruel, but it's not. It's really great. Because if nothing in me made him love me, then nothing I do can make him not love me. It means he's the most authentic and the most honest lover there is. It means he's not trying to extort something from you or get something from you. In Ephesians chapter 1, a guy who's writing to a church like this, he says it this way. In love, he predestined us to adoption as sons and daughters. He brought us into his family through Jesus Christ to himself. Why? According to the good pleasure of his will. That's a fancy way of saying, just because I wanted to. I loved you and brought you into my family through Jesus if you're coming through him. Why? Just because I wanted to. Because you could, because you're aiming at world domination? No, I already got world domination. Because you're gonna make something awesome? He's like, I made everything awesome. I am awesome. Because you're looking for an A team? He's like, no. Because I'm looking for you. I'm looking for you. I wrote this down. A lot of what we look for in our relationships with others is really only meant to be found in God. Jen Wilkin put this in her book, None Like Him, and I thought she said it really well. When we ask another human to be ultimately and unlimitedly trustworthy in an area, we are asking someone who is only human to be God. Sometimes I think we look at our spouse and go, I want you to be God, because we really aren't looking to God to be God. Sometimes we look at our boss or our employees and go, will you be God? And they're like, I can't do that. And you're like, but I need that. And you're like, yeah, because you're looking for God. Here's the good news. Only a God who doesn't need us is someone who I can believe when he says, I want you. I want you. You say, how can you be sure? It's really interesting. In verse 16, I'll go back, sorry, or just hang out there. In verse 16, I didn't put it in the slide, this is on me, not on them. He talks about Lebanon and all the trees. He's like, he's using altar language, worship language. Back then, when they wanted to commune with God, they would build an altar, and you would need wood for the fire, and then they would sacrifice on it, and you need an animal for a sacrifice. And this isn't because God needs it. Again, God doesn't need any of that stuff, right? Well, who's the sacrifice for if it's not for God? Us, right? If we're like, you want this, and he's like, I don't necessarily want this, you need this. He's trying to communicate something to us. You need something. For you who are needy to be in relationship with me who is not needy, there needs to be something to fill that gap. And so what they would do is they would burn an animal on an altar, and that would represent the gap, and it would fill in the gap so that the one who needs nothing can be with the one who needs everything. And in this verse, God says, all of the trees in Lebanon, we would say it this way, all of the tea in China, right? All of the sand in the seashore. He's like, all of that is not, you couldn't build an altar big enough. All the animals in Lebanon, if you took all of the trees, Lebanon was known for all the trees, you took all the animals, you built a giant altar, the biggest one ever, all the way to the sky, which you probably think of a verse or a chapter in the Bible where they tried this, all right? And they tried to do that, and he's like, wouldn't be enough. He said, well, then how? How? What is enough? It's interesting. You already saw it in Hebrews chapter 10. The author of Hebrews is writing to the Jewish people who are considering Jesus, and he presents Jesus this way. He says, consequently, when Jesus came into the world, here's what Jesus said. He said, sacrifice and offerings you have not desired. That tracks. Doesn't need them. It's not what he's looking for. Well, then what do we have? But a body you have prepared for me. What's Hebrews saying? Hebrews saying there is something sufficient enough to bridge the gap between our neediness and his imminence. You say, who's that? It's God himself. So the God of the Bible says, this is John 3, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. So God gets a body, fully God and fully man. You're like, that's crazy. I know. The God who gives nothing, or needs nothing, gives everything to you and me, so that we who need or can contribute nothing to our own life can have everything from him in Christ Jesus. It's not the blood of animals that fills in the gap. It's Jesus himself. So that you and I can find what we ultimately need, and that is a connection and a relationship with the God of the Bible. So as the band comes up, I'm just going to ask you this question. It's the question that's in verse 18. And ask this: who is like God? And to what will you compare him? And in their text, they answer an idol. But really, this represents two ways to live. All of us in this room this morning, we're coming from one of two places. We are either holding up everything in this world and attempting to look at God through the lens of it. Who are you going to compare God to? Well, everything. I'm going to compare him to my circumstance. I'm going to compare him to my frustrations. I'm going to compare him to my earthly parents. I'm going to compare him to my job status right now. I'm going to compare him to my bank account. I'm going to compare him to the music I like or my friends that I have or don't have. I'm going to compare him to all those things. I'm going to look at all those things and be like, where are you at? Who are you? Or I can hold up the God who needs nothing. And I can look at everything else in this world through the lens of him and go, my ultimate fulfillment is not in my job or in my money or in my parents or in my fill in the blank. My needs, my needs are totality found first and foremost in him, which makes everything else, James would tell us, a good gift. It's a gift. It's not manipulation. Your good health, if you have it, is not so God can use you for his own purposes to dominate the world. It's just a gift from God. How do you know? Because he gave us his Son. And a way of relating to God through the lens of God is Jesus. So if you've never done that, if you've just said, hey, I'm relating to God through my circumstance and everything else, through my sin, yet sin is relating to anything else as God other than God. It's like the mistake. It's what it is. It's the rebellion. It's the I'd rather talk to this rock that you made than to talk to you. I'd rather talk to this person, or I'd rather find my worth in this paper that has presidents on it. Or I'd rather find my significance in what everyone says about me, or how many followers I have, or whatever. All the time, the God who needs nothing is standing up there. It's like, is there any hope for us? Yeah, but it's not us going up, it's him coming down. So as we sing, I would encourage you, if you're here and you're a follower of Jesus, and you find yourself in the midst of a chore, maybe you just need to stop managing this morning and start worshiping him. And if you're here and you don't know him as a God who needs nothing, I'd encourage you to look at Jesus Christ as his payment for the life that you should have lived, and his gift to us to meet our greatest need, which is not a physical one. It's a spiritual one. Jesus met both, right? Jesus came, he healed people. That's a physical need that he met. Why? So that when he dies on the cross, we would believe that he can meet our spiritual need. If he can meet the physical needs of people in the Bible, he can meet the spiritual needs of people now. Can we trust him? He's still worth trusting. Let's pray, yeah? Father, we just ask this morning that we would worship you not out of things that we want from you, or not out of things that we think that you necessarily want from us as far as performance or to get you to do our bidding. May we just worship you for you being you. Thank you that you're not able to be tempted or manipulated. Thank you that we can trust you when you say you love us. For some of us this morning, we've never really known what that's like. Because for some of us, everybody who's ever said they loved us wanted something from us. Thank you that you're not that. Thank you that rather than